Okay, before we begin, it's very important that we keep context in mind. Okay? First of all, we should review a little bit where we're coming from. But the Rebbe has begun a discussion here of the concept of shviras hakelim, shattering of the kelim, which is probably the event that has had the most impact on the world in which we live in. And of course, this deals with the concept of olam hatohu and olam tikkun. In the chain of cause and effect in creation, there are a series of dimensions and a series of levels. From the loftiest, in which the concept of a world is totally abstract, it has no practical significance whatsoever. And as the creative process evolves, this is the Hasidic theory of evolution, as the creative process evolves, the possibility for mitzias becomes greater, becomes more emphatic. Properties and characteristics that we would associate with being start to become a little bit apparent. The idea of limitation, that's essential to being. You can't have beings unless a being is a limited entity with its own definite properties and its own descriptors. So as we evolve through Seder Shtalshalis, the whole process itself is totally paradoxical, totally dichotomous, absolute paradox. There's only the Rebbeinu Shalom. Even now, you say, well, I'm here, you're here, the cup is here. There's only the Rebbeinu Shalom. Einoid milvadoi. Good. On the other hand, these things are here. I am here, you are here. Is that true or is that not true? That is true. That is a dichotomy. That's a paradox. That is an irresolvable paradox that we may not be able to come up with a nice formal answer to, but we have to understand it because it defines who we are, why we're here. So there's a tension between, on the one hand, creator, and on the other hand, creation, because they, I won't say they conflict with each other, but they conflict with each other. So as the creator fashions and conceives of this series of stages, this series of dimensions that ultimately are going to culminate in this world that we live in, which is the purpose of everything, so things begin to change. A world is defined by Esser Spheres and Gimel Levushim. 10 spheres and 3 garments. That is the core of a world. It's not the world itself. It's the soul of a world. It's the spiritual core of a world. The idea of spheres, of attributes at the foundation of a world, to become a reality means that they have to become distinct. Well, in the essence of divinity, nothing is distinct. Everything is poshet. Poshet means uncompounded, uncomplex. So the situation is evolving from a state of very, very abstract possibilities for possibilities to possibilities that are beginning to be actualizable, such as limitation, such as specific modes of expression, interaction, chesed, gevurah, tiferes, and these dimensions and particulars, which all define the relationship of the Creator with creation, become more emphatic, more real, as we, a word I can think of is descend through this process. Atzilus is a real world. It's a situation where we have spheres, operative spheres. Spheres, for our definition right now, are artists for Kalim. Artists without Kalim are potentials without the possibility of actualization. Kalim without Or is like a guf without a neshama. So they interact with each other, but the interaction of artists for Kalim themselves is totally paradoxical, as the Rebbe's already described, because the nature of Or is ascent, the nature of Or is dveikus, the nature of Or is to cleave to its source, the nature of Kalim is hamshacha, it's urida, it's mitzias. The Keli is an extremely remarkable manifestation of divinity because it contains within itself the possibility for independence, for autonomy, which is absolutely stunning. Because what do you mean independence? Independence from God? How's such a thing possible? Of course, it's not possible. We're talking about in terms of Giluyim, Begilui. The whole system that we're discussing is ultimately for us and for the production of worlds that we can relate to. And in fact, the whole concept of a Seder, the whole concept, why do we need all these levels? Why do we learn all this Chassidus? Why do we need these technicalities? Because if we think carefully about it, this is a fabulous expression of love. Chassidus is all about love. It's a fabulous expression about love. The Rebbe Rashab could have created the world, yesh ma'ayin, from something from nothing, without any of this. And he's him, and the world's the world, and individuals within the world would undoubtedly, given seichel that he's given them, come to the conclusion that nothing creates itself, and the very, very peculiar circumstances in this little corner of the universe. How come everything is so favorable to our existence? So I've called people would come to the recognition that there's a God. That this would be mitzad seichel anushi. A person would come to the recognition that there's a God. The fact that today people fight this idea means there's very little seichel anushi around. But so good. Now what? Now what? What can you say about him? Nothing. What can you say? Mitzias Matzmusai. His existence is from himself. Bilti Mitzias Nimtza. He is not in a gedder of empirical Mitzias. The point of Seder Hishtalshelus is that the steps are lovingly chosen to allow for a graded relationship of God's children with himself. Not only that, but that everything that one does down here has an impact on him, and he communicates directly and bepnimius with his creations. Not only for the Jewish people, but for the entire world. Of course, the focal point is the ultimate gift is of all these obscurities and these dimensions and these concealments which result in our physical world, is that the ultimate rectification, the ultimate tikkun, does not come from him. He wants a dira b'tachtonim. Well, he's done very well in making a tachtonim. The dira, he turns the keys over to us. That's our job. So in a way, it's a relationship. It's a child-father relationship. It's a loving relationship. It's a relationship in which what you do means something, because there are channels and there are connections, direct connections from your body to your nefesh, from your nefesh to your neshama, from your neshama to yechida, from your yechida to the Rebbeinu Shalom. There are worlds in which every single object in this world is represented at some level and has its source and root at some level, and therefore whatever is done down here is meaningful, not just for us, but for him, because he makes it that way. And likewise, these channels allow for the Almighty to express himself in human terms. This is the seer of Adam, the form of Adam, compassion, justice, mercy, Chachma, Kula b'Chachma Sisa. He reveals himself within the context of these attributes. Very important for us to understand the attributes. The attributes are spheros, and for our purposes right now, spheros are oros v'kelim. That is what a sphere is. Are there spheros and or? It's a machloikis mukubalim. Could a sphere, but could a keli itself be called a sphere? There are certain Mikubalim would hold a little bit in that direction as well. We're not worried about all of these nuances. For us, the reality is a world in which we have spheres, artis v'kelim, and the ultimate manifestation of this, where the artis v'kelim with the spheres are operative and expressive, truly expressive, is Olam Hatikin, Olam Hatzilus. Before Olam Hatzilus, there are potentials, there are possibilities. The possibility for Kalim, an Odam Kadmai Lamashal, which is the first parts of after Tzimtzum. So you have, they're Kalim, they're called Sharshed and Neshamas de Gufais, the source of the Neshama of the Guf. They're not operative, they are there in potential. Mind you, Lamaila ain't Chaser Poil, but nonetheless they are not working, they are not operative. Operative means with respect to a makabel. Everything has to be with respect to a makabel. That's the point of Gilui. Makabel is a recipient, the recipient is us, the recipient is the world we live in. So, how did we get to Atzilus? Well, we didn't get to the ride was not smooth, because there's an oilam, there's an expression of spheres in a world before Atzilus. The experiment's already been done before, but it didn't work. The Rebbe described it. Now we're going back a little bit to review what we've discussed. That the idea is that the Almighty expresses Himself b'pnimius through attributes. Attributes are or, on the one hand, Keli, which defines the or in a particular way, on the other. Well, in the case of Olam HaTohu, which was the first experiment in spheres, it didn't work. The Oros did not match the Kalim. The Rebbe described it as a situation of great or and miyut HaKeli. Ribui or, miyut HaKeli. It was too much or for the Kalim. It's like you have a little, you're in a desert and you're dying if there's suddenly you come across a huge fire hydrant with a fire hose gushing water, but all you have is one of these little paper shot glasses. You could put in front of the fire hose. That's the end of the you're not going to get anything. It's not a keli. It's not suitable for that kind of hashpah. So it sounds very much like an engineering error. There was too much or for the kalim, or it was too great, the kalim were too small, so what happened? The kalim shattered. Not all of them. Eight did. We don't have to get into these details either. This was rectified. The first rectification is Olam HaTikkun, Olam HaTzilus. This was a rectification milamayla lamata. In other words, the rectification was performed by the Almighty, by the engineer. From Atzilus on down, Rabbi Sai, the rectification has yet to happen in its completion, and the rectification is not done by the boss. The rectification is done by his children. That is done by us. So the concept of Shviras HaKelim, the concept of Tikkun, is extremely important. The idea of perfection. What is the essence of human perfection? The essence of human perfection, in some sense, is like the Sirus of Atzilus. That's the Tzir of Adam. Adam is a lashon which goes on Atzilus. Shema of Atzilus. So Adam, the concept of 10 perfect modes of holy expression, this is a way in which the essence of a soul can manifest itself throughout creation, within creation. Its potentials and possibilities to manifest its unified essence in any number of different ways in this world, and to bring divinity into any number of dimensions within this world. So we have to understand now so how did the Shvira come about? Why did it come about? And how does Tohu relate to Tikkun? Well, how did it happen? Why did it happen? Which we'll get to. And secondly, how did the rectification occur? What was the rectification? These things are of critical importance to us, because our job is to create Tikkun within the world. The other point to raise here is that given our circumstance in this world, the idea is not simply to bring Atzilus, bring this world to the state that Atzilus is in terms of perfect illumination of Atzmas Ein Sof, but rather to bring light into Atzilus, the avodah of a person in this world, by dealing with the product of Olam HaTohu, by Shvira, by the various sparks of holiness hidden within creation, and elevating them and refining them causes a Hamshach of Or and Atzilus. So it's an incredible process, and it's an opportunity of a lifetime. What can I say? Okay, to get to the point, we have to understand, first of all, what are Oros and what are Kalim, and what are the relationship between Oros and Kalim. But keeping in mind now, these are not simply Kabbalistic technicalities. These define our very essence, and they define what we can accomplish in this world and the tremendous mission that we have here. So the Rebbe used as an example the idea of neshama v'guf. First of all, we have to realize that Aris and Kalim are antithetical. We said before, Aris, Aris of light, of Aris is dveikis. Aris is generally thought of as gevura in and of itself, because its nature is not to give and not to illuminate and radiate in and of itself. Its nature is to cleave to its source. Its nature is to ascend. Well, that's gevura's withholding. So, in a very general sense, light, or keeping in mind that or is only a metaphor, or is in a state of ascent, dveikus, helim. It seeks dveikus ba'atzmus. Kalim, on the other hand, are the opposite. The Rebbe pointed out, in order to have Aris v'Kalim, which is a gewaltige chiddush, to have a sphere, which is a phenomenal chiddush, an expressive, operative sphere, which on the one hand draws on that which is higher than itself, and on the other hand is mispoja to that which is a makabel and a recipient which is lower than itself. This requires a miracle from Hashem Yisbarach, the union of nefesh v'guf l'mashal. A nefesh without a guf, very beautiful, but you can't accomplish a thing. You can't put on tefillin. A neshama can't give tzedakah, can't put on tefillin, can't put on tefillin because it doesn't have a head and it doesn't have an arm. A guf without a neshama is a piece of cold cuts. So the chibur, the unity between these two totally antithetical entities, is absolutely miraculous. In other words, Simply being alive in a physical body is a second-by-second miracle. Mafli lasais, that's what it is. The idea being then that the or of the nefesh animates the guf, they become one thing, and this is a metaphor, this is a model, it's more than a metaphor actually, it's a model for the relationship of Aris V'Kelim. So this is where we have, as far as we've gotten, we're on page Reish Lamed Daled. I've got so many marks here, I don't know where we are. Okay, so let's... V'chol zeh, it's about 2/3 of the way down. The line begins, B'chinas yesh u'batel k'mosh kosu makam acher. That's how the line begins. Then there's a punctuation mark. V'chol zeh, we there? Yeah. V'chol zeh mipnei shahanefesh hi chelik eloka mimal mamish k'maya nitzutz hanimshach achar ha'avuka. All this, what all this? The nature of the neshama, the desire of the neshama to ascend, the teva of the neshama to ascend, the teva of the neshama for aliyah, for dvekis. Again, teva is something which is ma'ila matam v'das. It's not explainable. But that is its nature, that is its teva, as it is the same of the spark to be included within the flame. The nefesh elikis yearns for and draws after elikus lichlo legamer lemakardei uvasharshay. Its nature and its yearning is to be included within its source, subsumed within its source, which means, of course, it loses itself, loses its mitzias, and it becomes actually totally nullified within the source, which is divinity. So the Rebbe points out in Tanya very, very clearly that even though it loses its mitzias, so that sounds like, who wants to lose their Messias? That's something we can't relate to. But even though it loses its Messias, that is its desire, and that is its yearning. Why? B'teva. That's its teva. That's its nature. That's the nature of or. It's a critical thing. It's a critical nature of the many dimensions of or we're going to talk about. It's an absolutely critical dimension of or because it provides the entire world, and in particular, Jews in this world, with the tenua of ratzai, the desire of ascent, the desire to cleave, the desire to unite with the source. This is the shorish of half of a dynamic of ratzai v'shoiv. V'hagam demimcha hakoil. Not just or comes from neshama. It's not just neshama that comes from elikus. Hakoil ksiv degam. Haguf v'sharshem v'chinas orein soif. Guf the shorsh is also orein soif. So how is they both have the same source? There's only one source. They both have the same source. The nature of the neshama is ascent. The nature of the guf is mitzias in Yerida. Ach you do. However, it's no. The mitzias is havas haguf v'chinas orein soif. The way in which they evolve from their source is very different. The hisavas haguf, the creation of the guf, v'chinas orein soif, from orein soif, hu b'derech brias yesh ma'ayin. It comes by way of yesh ma'ayin, which is another tremendous paradox and a tremendous miracle. So the keli lamashal, the guf lamashal, there's only one source, but the process by which it emerges from its source is such that it does not feel its source. The or feels its source, and therefore the nature of or and the tendency of or is to cleave to the source, to yearn for the source, to rise to the source. But if you don't feel the source, so there you are. There's no such tendency. You now become, to a certain extent, autonomous, divorced from the source. Chas v'shalom is not true. The keli is as much united with the source as the or, but the union is a union of helam. The or, which is makayim, a keli, mahava, makayim, machaya, the keli by itself has its own or, but it is behelam, and that's the nature of yesh ma'ayin. The ayin isn't really ayin. The ayin's elukus. So what you have then is a guf or a keli, or however you want to look at it, that evolves in such a way that its source is concealed from it, and therefore it feels itself, and it has no need or sense or desire to ascend. Shuhu b'chinas helam v'hester habarim ha'nivra. This is the inyan. Yesh ma'ayin is the inyan of the concealment of the Creator from the creation. Rak behelam yesh begufais v'kelim b'chinas atzmi yisorin soiv. However, in a hidden way, there is in bodies and in Kalim, some or in Soif. If not, there'd be no such thing as a keli or a body. As will be explained in Mirza Hashem. Little maamar hamuzgar, a little parenthetical statement, powerful issue raised here. That the source of Or, the source of Keli, is Or Ein Sof, both are sustained, maintained by Or Ein Sof, one by way of revelation, or one by way of concealment, Keli. But the main thing here is that within that source, the ultimate source of the Kalim is higher than the source of Or, which has tremendous implications for Avodah, and has tremendous implications for why the world looks the way it does, and to a certain extent, to a large extent, it explains why Or would ever be attracted to a Keli. Since the Teva of Or is Aliyah, and the Keli is Yerida, like we learned, how do you get them together? What kind of a shidduch is this? Oh, well, the Eibishter steps in. But the Eibishter steps in on the side of the Keli. The Or is attracted to the Keli, because the Keli has Or Ein Sof in it from a shorish higher than the Or itself. The thing is that it's there behelim. Well, helim is something that applies to a Keli, but it does not apply to Or. And therefore, the Or smells out that Or Ein Sof, smells out that Atzmius Or that's in the Keli that the Keli itself doesn't know about, and the Or is attracted to and will be miyuchad with the Keli, despite the fact that there's a tension here, because the nature of the Or is to ascend, and here this is Yerida. That's the great another paradox, which has very practical implications for us. You want etzem. You see, people think you have to go up. You have to go down. You want etzem. Etzem is only found here. Etzem is only found in limitation. Etzem is only found in mitzias. Etzem is ultimately found only in oilam asiyah gashmis. That's why there's so little revealed here, because etzem is heteros pashtus. It's a trade-off. You want etzem, you're not going to get gilui. You want gilui, very nice. Aris and Gan Eden and Vesachos. No end. But the inyan atzmi is associated with the keli. The tachlis is malchus, which is the sharash of Isis and Kalim. And therefore, what does it mean in practical terms for us? Practical terms for us, it means that the highest, the most unbelievable thing that a person can experience in existence, all of existence, is to do a physical mitzvah. There's no malach on earth, in the heavens, there's no neshama in Gan Eden who could possibly reach that level of etzem as someone putting on tefillin and putting a penny in a pushka. Why? Because they're physical. The keli is capable of bittul, but it's only bittul hayesh. Bittul hayesh means it does not dissolve out of existence, it does not cleave to its source, it behaves in accordance with the desires of its source. Yesh la'ayin. It can't be bittul to the ayin completely because it doesn't sense the ayin altogether. Just as we have the situation with the nefesh and the guf lamata, you have the same situation lamaila. Be'inyan artis v'kelim, with the concept of artis v'kelim. Da'or mitzad atzmayu b'chinas ha'lah. The or in and of itself, without any other dimensions added, it cleaves. Its nature is aliyah. Its nature is ascent. It's withdrawal. Hashem Elokecha Eish Oichluhu, as Pasuk says, Hashem, your God, is a consuming fire. The nature of fire is to ascend. The nature of fire is to depart from the wick or from the wood and to be subsumed in its source l'mayla. Just as is the case of physical fire, which one can see, it's in a constant state of aliyah. It's constantly going up and down, seemingly desiring to depart from the fuel and to seek its unity in Eish Yisari L'mayla. V'l'sharsha u'makara, its source and its root. B'chinas Eish HaYisari, which is the spiritual foundation, spiritual source of Eish. So why doesn't it? Very simple, it can't. It's nailed down to something. However, it is grasped below. They're gashmistic things. It's grasped by wood or a wick. Similarly, the Or Eloki, the divinity that illuminates and encloses within the kelim, teva lailos l'mayla. Its teva is the same as the eish. Its teva is to ascend l'mayla, not to descend lamata, not to be associated with kelim, to fuse with kelim. Lichlol b'b'chinas arin seif makari b'sharshay, to be included in arin seif, its source and its root. V'zehu echad mahatamim sha'ardes elyonim nikroyim b'shem or v'loy shefa. Critical sentence from Rabbi Sab. We're not going to get to a clear understanding of this for another couple of weeks. The Rebbe deals with the next ois. But the Rebbe says this is one of the reasons, not the only reason, this is one of the reasons that the ois elyonim, that the or lamayla, nikroyim b'shem or. This is why they're called or. And they are not called shefa. To indicate that the or is requires the ma'or. So we have these two terms, or v'shefa. Or is a term which is used in Sifrei Kabbalah, Sifrei Chassidus. Shefa is a term which one commonly finds in Sifrei Hakira, in philosophical tracts like Mor Nevuchim. How do they differ? They're not interchangeable. They don't really mean the same thing. The Rebbe is going to describe it in great detail later on. The only thing I want to focus on now is the point that's being made here, is that or requires the ma'or, shefa does not. Okay? So both are giving, both are extension, both are illumination, both are or of some type or some sort. But let's take the mashal of or, the shemesh, or v'shemesh, the sunlight and the sun. So the or extends from the sun, goes throughout the expanse of the universe, wherever it goes. And we say, there's a lot of sunlight around. It hits the earth. It does all kinds of things. It causes a drought, makes the plants grow, gives you a sunburn. It has a whole variety of effects. In fact, it has no reality in and of itself altogether. It exists only insofar as the sun emits it. So there's no such thing. There's no independent object. There's no independent entity called sunlight. It's simply an expression of the sun. If the sun were to go out, so, you can't say, at least we've got, or if someone, where you're sitting in a room and the sun is coming through the window, and someone pulls down the shade, well, at least we got the sunlight on this side of the shade. So we'll do without the rest for the time being. You don't have anything, because the sunlight has no reality outside of the fact that it emanates from the sun. In the case of shefa is a form of light as well. Let's consider the light of the intellect. You have a teacher and a student. The teacher has some inyan in his mind. He's got to give it over to the Talmud. So he thinks and he trachts and he gives over. That's or. That's or haseichel, light of the intellect. Light of the intellect is now given over the same way the sun illuminates or radiates sunlight to recipients who can enjoy it and take advantage of it and partake of it. The thing is that the idea no longer, first of all, the idea is, well, we'll get into that later on, but the main thing here is the idea no longer needs him. Once he spoke it, it's real. It becomes once he spoke it, it becomes a something that's going to enter the ears of someone else. And now that idea, that piece of ore, like a chunk of his mind, is now implanted in the head of somebody else, has independent existence by itself, as it's perceived and received by the mind of whoever's listening. And the student will walk away, and the Rav will walk away, and the idea now belongs to the student as much as it belongs to him. That is shefa. So shefa is a hashpa of a mitzias, or is built in mitzias and ganzen. The only thing we're using this term here, we can see a little bit later on, we're using the term here only to underscore the fact that or has no independent existence. It is constantly and always a product of the ma'or.
But I don't mean to get too technical, but the concept of light years, light.
Yes, you have to understand. So the mashal actually is not perfect, because actually, if the sun went out, you have something like 8 more minutes of light before lights really go out, something like that. There is okay. Because I don't want to get into this in any detail, but there's no such thing as a perfect mashal. There's no such thing as a perfect physical mashal for something in the realm of Seder Shtalshos, for one very simple reason. Nothing's perfect down here. This world is a product of shvira. Physical existence is a product of shvira, and therefore perfection is something we don't see. We cannot see, not least in terms of physical expression. So there's no such thing as a mashal which is perfect. If the mashal were perfect, it would be the nimshal, and then you'd be fine. Good point. Ki yafshar liyos or below ma'or. You can't have a ma'or without or. Can you have an idea without a teacher? Sure. Once he's taught it, it's a free-for-all. V'chol makom sha'or me'er sham hu ha'ma'or atzmai. There's a asterisk here, and there's a note that this tzarech ian cotton. What's the kavanah of this? I don't understand what means tzarech ian cotton. To my way of thinking, it's tzarech ian gadol, but so a little bit ambiguous. Let's go back to the lashon in a minute. V'chol makom sha'or me'ir sham hu ha'ma'or. Every place that the or glows, there is the ma'or itself. What's the Rebbe saying? There are two possibilities as far as I can see. It's a very strange lashon. Is the ma'or itself really there wherever the or glows? We go to Tanya, we go to Shar Yichud V'Muna. And the Rebbe mentions the fact, makes a lengthy mashal for the fact that or has meaning only when it is outside of its source. When or is within its source, I was using the sun as a mashal. When sunlight is within its source, within the sun, we don't even speak of or. We speak of sun. It'd be ridiculous to talk about the sunlight in the sun. It's the sun itself, the ma'or atzma. Is there light there? Yes, because if there weren't light there wouldn't be light there. Could extend from the sun. But the light itself is totally negated to the source of all light, which is the sun. So it's only when light leaves the sun that we can speak of sunlight as an entity. They give sunburns and makes flowers grow. It's only outside of its source. Red points out in Shar Yichud V'Muna it's never outside of its source, which causes a tremendous complexity. If it's never outside of its source, how's there a metzius of anything? Well, the Rebbe goes into a discussion of tzimtzum, what means gevura. So it may be relating to that although we talk of or as a I don't want to say a davar b'fnei asma, it's something in and of itself, because it's not, but we speak of it in its own terms. We must understand that the source is always there. That's one thing. The other thing, it could be much more pashut than that. It could simply mean that there is no or without a ma'or illuminating it. The main thing is we understand clearly that or is and the ma'or are bound up together always, under all circumstances, and for that reason, the or reflects the ma'or. Or is mine a ma'or. Or reflects the ma'or, truthfully and faithfully. Hamor atzmai v'ha'or davik b'mor. The or cleaves to the ma'or. That means or ein soif. Wherever you find it, however it goes, however far it goes, whatever keli it ends up in, whatever parasite it goes through, however it's maluvish, however it's reflected or deflected, it remains in essence or ein soif. The or that becomes united with and clothed in kelim, datzilus of atzilus, hagam b'hapartzufim elyonim, shalamayim atzilus, even partzufim elyonim higher than atzilus. There are configurations, there are modes of divine expression above atzilus. These are extremely abstract. These are extremely edel, very, very difficult to get any kind of a handle on altogether, but they're there. They're all in a way of kav. So in other words, if we talk about the entire creative process, beginning with Odom Kadmon, Akudim, Nakudim, Berudim, these are just terms right now, but if we think of the evolutionary process, the creative process, all of it begins with kav, Shohu b'chinas gili or shala achrat simsim b'arein seif. This is gili or after simsim b'arein seif. Why is the Rebbe bringing this in? Why do we have to know it? What's it going to tell us? How is this going to help us? Well, we're dealing with or. What kind of or are we dealing with? We have something called orein seif. Fine. What does orein seif? We don't know. Hu v'shmoy echad. He and his name are one. There's not even a thought of Olam. It's not even a thought of it's the Rebbeinu Shalom in himself. Mind you, the fact that there's a Shmoi already tells you that this isn't the ultimate. Who would be the ultimate? Shmoi already means, Shmoi means name. He and his name are one. We think of that shame as Atzmas or Ein Soif. There's the Ma'or, the luminary, and there's Or as a reflection of Atzmas. But that's what there is. There's not a concept. There's not a concept, not a possibility of Olam. There's not a possibility of anything. Is the Rebbeinu Shalom reflecting to himself, as it were, And as he is in some way, that's what the or shows to him in some way. Well, you can't make anything out of this. You can't do anything. The world's filled with him. It's filled with him, and there's not the world. There is no world. Everything. There's only him. There's him, and there's a reflection of himself to himself. So, in order to create, so the question, of course, then what's the point of the or? He knows himself. He doesn't have to look in a mirror. He doesn't require or. So right away, there's a idea, a thought comes to mind that even the or Ein Sof is not shaykh. It's not in any way connected with creation. It has nothing to do with creation. It is so far above creation, it's ridiculous. It's so sublime that what can one say about it altogether? But it's a medium of some sort. It's a medium. It's not him. It's an illumination from him, and you can work with it. One thing you can do with it is you can hide it. You can't hide him. Why? Because the word hiding doesn't apply to etzem. It's a meaningless word. God is all there is. You can't hide all there is. Mind you, he can hide himself from himself if he so desires. When you go to teach, let's say, a small child something, so you understand the thing with the years of maturity and learning and understanding. The child has to be explained in ways which are shaykh to the child. So the famous mashal, the classic mashal, is that the first thing you've got to do is get rid of yourself. You've got to hide yourself. From who? From him. No, I'm sorry, not from him. From you. You've got to hide yourself from you. You've got to take the 60-year-old man, put him to the side with all of the knowledge and understanding and hasaga that he has, and make a space in the mind where you're going to find the 10-year-old that you once were, and the 10-year-old seichel, and the 10-year-old or, and the 10-year-old misholim, and the 10-year-old sprach that is, because you were once 10 years old too. Mind you, if you can't relate to yourself at 10 years old, you're not going to make a good teacher. That's one thing we know for sure. But it's in there. But it requires a self-concealment. So once you've concealed, now all kinds of possibilities can come into that concealment and can be cultivated and developed, and they won't be inundated by you. You will not inundate your thinking with yourself. Tzimtzum is a concealment of or, of light, of the light of etzem, if you like. And within that tzimtzum now, things can happen. What can happen is that there can now be a very limited expression of light from outside. We call it tzimtzum. They're very, very, very powerful metaphors. We call the product of tzimtzum holol. Hol means a void. Or makam panui. Makam panui means an empty space. These are all in concept. But from in that empty space now, you could draw a thin, a diminished illumination of Or Ein Sof, which is now, there's a picture for this. It's unbelievable. So you look at Eitz Chaim, I forget which chapter is near the beginning, you're going to see a circle, you're going to see a radius. The Reb Chaim Vital Zal drew that. I mean, it's amazing. So, what is it all about? Everything outside that circle is Or Ein Sof, conceptually. The circle itself is tzimtzum. It is a self-concealment. It is a self-withdrawal, as it were, withdrawal of or. And into that space, you have a line from the perimeter of the circle, which encompasses that space. You have a line drawn to the center point in that circle. It's called a radius. That's the whole diagram. Fabulous. Gewalt, what chidushim. Because now what you have is you had Or Ein Sof, which is pajut. What can you say? You can't say anything. Now you have Or Ein Sof, which has dimensions. It's got a top. It's got a bottom. It has a beginning. It has an end. Beginning, end, top, bottom. It didn't exist before. Now it exists. Pardon?
How can you call it Or Ein Sof?
Because it's still be'etzem Or Ein Sof. It didn't come from anywhere other than Or Ein Sof.
So what are you calling Or? You're calling the
Or Ein Sof, this is a very big, fantastic question. I don't mean to, it's a fabulous question. But Or Ein Sof doesn't necessarily mean that the Or is constantly mispajut. Or Ein Sof can be in a way of helm, it can be a way of restriction. But be'etzem, it's Or Ein Sof. It doesn't necessarily mean the hispashtus Ein Sof l'hispashtusai, although it is that too. But it's be'etzem Or Ein Sof, nothing other than Or Ein Sof. hold on for a while, because we're going to hopefully be able to, the or of Atzilus, the or which is Meluvish in the Keli of Chesed, or a Chesed of Atzilus, very far down the line from this, okay? Be'etzem, that's or Ein Sof. It does not lose its Ein Sof qualities and properties. It just simply comes in a quantitatively restricted way. Which brings us to another very important point. I'm glad you raised it. Because Ein Sof does not mean infinite. Doesn't necessarily mean, it may mean infinite, but it means much, much more than that. So this is or Ein Sof, this is an or of endless capacity, of endlessness, the same way that we call Ein Sof or, but we call the maor Ein Lo Tchila. Why? Because something could be Ein Sof, but could have a Tchila. Ein Lo Tchila means there's no beginning. Ein Sof means there's no end. This is or Ein Sof. This or has no end. And that could be in many, many different ways. Mata in case Maila in case mata in Tachlis. Mata in Tachlis, that's through Seder Shtalshu, but still called or Ein Sof. So the qualitatively, it is the expression of Ein Sof, and it does not lose that through Tzimtzum. Well, but again, it's not really the focus of the maamar. Tzimtzum or Ein Sof. Tzimtzum hu b'chinas helm. Tzimtzum b'chinas helm. Now we have this kav, in which there's a top, there's a bottom. So now the Rebbe is raising a question here. So actually, he's raising your question. That's very good. He's raising your question. He says, "Wait a minute. What do you mean this or? This or also, it would seem, is a product of Helam of Niva from Barre. It comes from, you have Tzimtzum's a Helam, and then you have, is that not Yeshma Ayin? Which would mean that the Kav is no longer or Ein Sof. You're quite right. Ach be'emes gam la'acharat tzimtzum. However, be'emes, even after tzimtzum, loy nishtana or memuhus. This is the main thing. When I'm talking about Metzius, talking about the muhus, it's the very essence. Loy nishtana muhusoi hu b'chinas or Ein Sof kamay koydem at tzimtzum. There's been no change. It's the same or Ein Sof acharat tzimtzum as it is koydem at tzimtzum. The only thing is that now it has been fashioned in such a way is that it can relate to dimensions, whereas before it was inundated within its source. So the or Ein Sof stays or Ein Sof. Upulas hat tzimtzum hu sha'or lifnei hat tzimtzum. So what does tzimtzum do then? Tzimtzum is poil, makes a change. What's the change? Shahayu mamali amakam achol, that the or Ein Sof before tzimtzum, before this self-concealment, before this hiding, now it comes in a way that it can be meluvish and oilamais. Why shouldn't it be able to be meluvish and oilamais if it's Ein Sof? Mata ad ein tachlis. Shalachar tzimtzum ad la'olam, forever, for endlessly. So what tzimtzum has done is fashion or in such a way that the or is shaykh, that it's possible. It still remains or, it does not change, it's not yesh ma'ayin, it's not anything qualitatively, anything different than it was koydem at tzimtzum, but it has now come through tzimtzum, and therefore it is possible to be meluvish and oilamais, to give rise to worlds. B'derech katsara, in a short way. So, Kamosh Kosmo Kamach was explained elsewhere by Riches of Etzama or Loy Nishtan Mehusa V'Dovik Makar, but of Etzama or Loyim Nishtan, Etzama is not changed in any way, and it's Mehus, and it's Dovik B'Makar. Kamar or Haziv Hashemesh Ha'Meir Lamata Dovik B'Makari Hu Guf Kadar Hashemesh. Or that comes from the sun, that comes through your window and makes a little spot on your table. Is the exact same or. No different. Qualitatively, physically, it is no different than it was when it was inside, when it was being generated by the reactor that is the sun. It's the same thing. It's bli shinui. And that's
a little weaker, no?
Fine. But it has all the properties of or. It is missing nothing. Whatever or is, that's what it is. It's lost nothing, it's missing nothing, it has just come by way of a filter or whatever. But it is the same thing, there's no shinui, which means it's not Yeshman, it's Gili Helam.
Is it because the Yesh Ma'ayin means that it feels itself different, and the R doesn't feel itself any different?
Yesh Ma'ayin is that you have a Metzias Bifnei Atzmai, which comes about by means of a shinui, by a change.
So that shinui.
So with the or, there is no shinui. The or is direct from the ma'or, and that's the iyu v'acharei echad. Or and etzem are one. Iyu v'gamoy echad doesn't say iyu v'gamoy echad. So iyu v'acharei echad. Or and etzem are one. Etzem and kalim are one. But it's not the same one; it's a different one. And the one of etzem to kalim is by virtue of or. The main feature of or is that it's. The Rebbe is saying all along, it's davik. What is davik? It's good to raise the issue. What does davik mean? What does dvekus imply for us? What are the implications of the fact that or is davik b'makar? It means that it is always reflecting the makar. That it faithfully and truly is of the makar. It reflects the makar bli shinui. Since it's ayin be'etzem, it's not a piece of makar. Sunlight is not a chunk of sun that comes down here. It's not a metzias. It's not the mahus of sun. It's ayin be'etzem, which is another beautiful part of the mashal. But it is a perfect reflection of its source. It never loses that. Even if it becomes maluvish and oilamais, it is a perfect reflection of its source. Ukamai kain b'chinas ha'or eluki hamir ba'oilamais davik m'makarei b'chinas atzmius ha'or. Good. Ukamai hanitzutz shenimshach b'teva ya'achra havuk, like a spark which by nature seeks to cleave to the torch, to the flame. Kamai kain b'chinas or eloki chaftzei v'ratzonei lichlal l'mayla rak shenechaz al yidei hakelim sha'hakelim mamshichem esa or. It's only that the kelim are mamshich the or. That's the only reason that or does not cleave to its source and maintain itself in its source. But the fact that it cleaves to its source, no matter where it is, even Ores and Kalim, we're not talking about dvekus of or kodim at simsum or dvekus of keser or dvekus. We're talking about or mamish that's already maluvish in the keli. It has the same dvekus, the same sense of dvekus, the same hergish of source that or has because or is or. Doesn't matter what quantity the or is. Doesn't matter what soif column. Doesn't matter what mamali column. Or is or. Or ein soif stays or ein soif. If it were a shinui, so now what? If it changes, let's say or were to change quality, say that simsum were to change the quality of the or in some fundamental way. Now the creator is no longer connected with creation. The panimas. Fine, yesh ma'ayin is very good, but yesh ma'ayin is not a connection. Well, yesh ma'ayin is kalim. But yesh ma'ayin in and of itself, not only in and of itself, cannot account for the unity of the creator with his creation in a revealed way. You'd be down here and he'd be up there, and that's it. So there's or ein soif stays or ein soif, and this is the ultimate connection of atzmus with everything. Comes in the way of helim, comes in the way of miyut, comes in the way of tzimtzum. Yes, no question about it. You can take or from the sun. And it is just by virtue of the fact that it's traveled through the universe to get to the earth, it's diminished. On a cloudy day, it'll be gray. Okay, it'll come through a stained glass window. It'll be red or it'll be blue. So you say these are fundamental changes. They're not changes at all. It is or, has the same qualities it's always had. It hasn't changed. It is or, and it reflects its shorsh in some way. She is gala lamata dafka. Sha'akelim ikram hu b'chinas hamshacha dafka. Kelim, as again the Rebbe repeats, kelim with the union of hamshacha. V'zeu klolas inyan ha'avoida de isrus l'tata isrus l'leila. This is the ikar of avoida, meaning that a stimulus from below, isrus l'tata, is responded to by a response from above. Shekol avoida lamata hamshich b'chinas aris v'kelim. So things are so designed that anything you do down here in the way of Tartar mitzvahs is going to bring a hamshacha of or, is going to be mamshech or. Kalim being the critical thing. The beheder ha'avoida, without avoida, so what then? This is from Yeshaya. Al b'shemayim kadrus. I will make of the heavens blackness. So in other words, the point is that or, the process of or, now, hidden in this is the concept already of Ratzu and Shuv. Because the nature of or is ratzai. Why? Because the sharash of or is ma'or, and by teva the or is the ma'or is nirgish in the or, and it stays that way throughout. Wherever or goes, it stays or. That's the nature of ratzai. Shuv is the union of keli. The idea then is the dynamic here is to be mamshech or requires an avodah with kalim, it requires an avodah with mitzias, and this is what is mamshech or, and this is what brings or into a state of shayv into existence, into being. Shanasa helam v'hester lamata mipnei sha'or mistalik. If without avodah, so there's a helam v'hester, the or is nistalik. Ve'eno me'ir begili b'mayim rekada anta tistalik. Along the lines of this from Pasach Eliyahu, that were you to withdraw from the names, which are spheres, kagufa b'loi nishmas. It would be like a body without a neshama. Mamela nasa hester lamata. Without question, there'd be a hester lamata. What is this hester lamata that has come about through faulty avodah or lack of avodah or problematic avodah or no avodah? We have a name for it. It's called golus, and it's a very clear, obvious hester. Which is explained elsewhere. The point of avodah is to bring aris into atzilus. There's a question. What's the question? Is not atzilus perfect? Is not atzilus an oilam ein soif? Is not atzilus called oilam hatikkun? It's already been masaken, and it's a tikkun, and there's a seder, and it's aris v'kelim, and it's reached a state of perfection. Well, perfection isn't necessarily the kavanah. That's true. Atzilus is all of those things. Atzilus mavar milamayla lamata. Atzilus already was a done deal before we got here. But Atzilus is not what it's all about. Atzilus is a mamutza. Atzilus is an oilam, is a dimension which is necessary, ultimately, for those of us in creation who are mugbal in some way to relate to Ein Sof in a revealed, true, connected way. So Atzilus is a paradox. On the one hand, and this goes back to your question also, on the one hand, it has kalim, which makes it an oilam. It's esespheres, they're really esespheres. There are 10 of them. It's not just potential for 10, not just, there are poshet 10 of them. So there are mamish kalim, real kalim of Atzilus, which are mamshech or and miyuchad with or. That's you have the inyan already of the possibility of mitzias. The possibility there is no mitzias in Atzilus, but they are the possibility. They are ultimately what are going to evolve into the possibility of autonomy and independence in the next world. So the idea of hamshach, the idea of mitzias, the idea of limitation, the idea of autonomy, that's there in Atzilus. On the other hand, you have Ein Sof Mamish. What's the Ein Sof Mamish? That's the Orlan's Meluvish and the Kalim. Because even though the Orans came through Tzimtzum, even though they've come a long way, even though they are very much diminished quantitatively, they remain or Ein Sof. So Atzilus, you have the paradox. It's called an Oilam Ein Sof. On the one hand, Oilam, on the other hand, Ein Sof. That's total stira. Because if it's an oilam, how can it be Ein Sof? If it's Ein Sof, how can it be an oilam? That's another discussion for another time. But that is the point of Atzilus. And it's dependent upon the fact that or remains or. And it's dependent upon the fact that Kalim have some aspect, some quality of autonomy, which you could call Bein Reich, Yeshman, however you want to think of them. That they bring down Elukus Lamata. Maybe we'll stop here. Are we we all right on this? Yeah? Okay. I want you to know, I love these questions. I mean, these are very, very good. It's very helpful, and it's good.
I read the rest of them.